The room was loud, not with music, not with excitement, but with careless laughter. A group of men stood near the entrance, joking, pushing each other, killing time. For them, this place was just another stop, another moment to show confidence, another chance to feel important. Then the door opened. At first, nobody paid attention. An old man stepped inside. His hair was white, his shoulders slightly bent. His steps were slow, not weak but careful. He didn't look like someone who belonged there. A few heads turned. Then a few smirks appeared. One of them whispered, "Is this a joke?" Another laughed quietly. Someone else shook his head. They didn't see a person. They saw a stereotype. To them, he was just another fragile old man. Someone out of place. Someone easy to ignore. Someone easy to mock. He felt their eyes on him. Not the kind of eyes that show respect. The kind that judge. The kind that measure. The kind that decide your value in seconds. He had seen that look before. Many times. For decades, people had underestimated him. They saw wrinkles and assumed weakness. They saw age and assumed uselessness. They saw slow steps and assumed slow mind. But none of them saw what really mattered. They didn't see the discipline hidden behind his calm face. They didn't see the years of pain, training, failure, and rebuilding. They didn't see the history written into his bones. He walked a few steps forward and stopped, not because he was afraid, but because he was observing. Every face, every movement, every sound. His breathing was steady. His eyes were alert. This was not the body language of fear. This was the body language of someone who had learned to stay calm in any situation. The laughter grew a little louder. Someone said, "Hey, old man, you lost?" Another voice added, "This place isn't for you." More chuckles. More confidence. They thought they were in control. But what they didn't understand was this. Control doesn't always come from size. It doesn't always come from youth. It doesn't always come from noise. Sometimes, control comes from silence. The old man didn't respond. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He didn't try to prove anything. He simply stood there, still, calm, unshaken. And in that moment, while they were laughing, they had no idea that they were standing in front of a man whose past could rewrite everything they thought they knew about strength. The old man didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout. He didn't try to intimidate. He just stood there, silent, steady, like a mountain in the middle of a storm. The room had been full of laughter a moment ago, but now there was a subtle shift. A faint pause. A slight hesitation. Something had changed. They could feel it, though they didn't understand why. He didn't move to confront them. He didn't even make eye contact immediately. Instead, he let them underestimate him. Let them believe the stereotype they wanted to see. Because he knew a secret they didn't. True strength is rarely loud. True strength doesn't need to announce itself. True strength waits, and then reveals itself at the perfect moment. They noticed it gradually. The calmness in his posture. The way he stood, shoulders back, spine straight, eyes scanning but not flinching. Not because he was fearless, but because he had learned to control fear long ago. Every glance, every breath, every subtle movement had a purpose. Every step was calculated, even in what appeared to be hesitation. He smiled quietly, almost imperceptibly. It wasn't a cruel smile. It wasn't a boastful smile. It was a smile of experience. A smile of someone who had survived, thrived, and conquered situations far worse than this. A smile that whispered silently to the world, "You don't know what you're dealing with." They laughed again, louder this time, tried to cover up the uneasy feeling creeping into their confidence. "Old man, why don't you take a seat?" One of them sneered. Another said, "We've got business here. Go bother someone else." He didn't react. Not a single muscle twitched. His calmness was magnetic. His presence demanded attention without him saying a word. And then someone made a careless joke. A remark about his age. About how slow he must be. About how fragile. About how he couldn't possibly be capable of anything meaningful. The room laughed, thinking they were harmless, thinking the old man was harmless. They didn't know. He had spent his life proving people wrong. He had spent decades in places where underestimation was a weapon against him, and he had learned to turn it into his advantage. Every sneer, every laugh, every insult had shaped him. Each one had sharpened his mind, hardened his spirit, and refined his skill. For decades, he had been underestimated. People saw wrinkles and assumed weakness. People saw age and assumed uselessness. People saw slow steps and assumed slowness of thought. But they didn't see what truly mattered. They didn't see the countless hours of training, the countless hours of discipline, the countless sacrifices he had made. They didn't see the wisdom that came from failure. They didn't see the strategic mind that could assess any situation in seconds. They didn't see the calm before the storm he carried quietly inside him, invisible until unleashed at the right moment. And most importantly, they didn't know that he had trained the greatest of all. They didn't know that the world had once watched him shape legends. They didn't know that every movement he had made, every lesson he had taught, every technique he had perfected was part of a legacy that commanded respect. Now, the laughter in the room was fading. Confidence was slowly turning into doubt. Whispers began. Eyes flicked nervously. Everyone sensed something they couldn't name. Something intangible but undeniable. The old man didn't speak. He didn't need to. The weight of experience, the aura of mastery, the silent authority, it was all there. And it was enough. And in that moment, a single truth became clear. This was not just an old man. This was a teacher, a master, a man whose life had been a testament to strength, skill, and resilience. And this time, he wasn't just standing there to be seen. He was standing there to remind them. Never underestimate a lifetime of experience. Never assume weakness from age. Never mistake calm for inability. Because the moment they did, that's when the world changes in ways they could never imagine. The room had grown quiet. The kind of quiet that feels heavy. Not just silence, but tension. Not just a tension, but a kind of fear you can't name. They thought they had judged him completely. They thought they knew him. They thought they were in control. And then, almost like a whisper carried by the wind, someone said it. This man didn't just train ordinary fighters. A pause, a glance, a chuckle. What do you mean? One of them asked. He trained Bruce Lee. At first, the word seemed like a joke, a tall tale, a rumor, something said to scare the unwise. But as the echo of the name settled into the room, something changed. The laughter stopped. Eyes widened. Heads turned. Whispers spread like wildfire. Bruce Lee, someone repeated, almost in disbelief. Are you serious? Another whispered. I thought he was just old. A third muttered under his breath. The old man stood there, expression calm, unchanging. His small, knowing smile hadn't disappeared. But now, the room began to see that smile differently. Not arrogance, not pride, but a quiet confidence that spoke louder than words ever could. It wasn't just age that defined him. It wasn't just wrinkles or a stoop back. It was a lifetime of mastery, a lifetime of shaping champions, a lifetime of skill hidden under patience, under silence, under the assumption that nobody would notice. They tried to laugh again. One man scoffed. Come on, Bruce Lee? You're kidding, right? But the atmosphere had shifted. Something intangible, something undeniable, had changed. There was a weight in the room now. The kind of weight that presses down on your chest when you realize maybe you're standing in front of someone far beyond what you thought possible. The old man's eyes flicked toward the youngest, the most confident, the one who had been joking the loudest. Just a look, a single, deliberate glance. That was all it took. And suddenly, no one was laughing, because deep down, everyone understood. The eyes weren't just seeing an old man. They were seeing a teacher, a master, a legend hidden in plain sight, a person whose experience could dismantle arrogance without a single word. No one could pinpoint exactly what changed. Was it the posture, the steady breathing, the calmness? Or was it the name they couldn't stop thinking about? Bruce Lee? Yes, it was all of it. And then the room shifted again. People leaned closer, nervously. Every move the old man made seemed deliberate, intentional. Every small motion, the slight turn of the head, the subtle adjustment of his stance, carried a story, a warning, a lesson they weren't ready to learn. This man trained Bruce Lee. The words echoed again. The realization began to sink in. This was not a man to be underestimated. This was a man whose past could rewrite their assumptions in seconds. Whispers turned into stammered questions. Did he really? Is that possible? Could someone like him teach Bruce Lee? The old man didn't answer. He didn't have to. His presence, his aura, his quiet mastery said everything. Every glance, every subtle breath, every slight movement revealed decades of discipline. For decades, he had waited for the moment where his skills would matter, where experience would outweigh youth, where patience would reveal the truth to the unwise. And now, that moment had arrived. He wasn't moving yet. He wasn't striking. He wasn't demonstrating. But the room already felt the impact of his presence. Already, fear, respect, and awe began to creep in. Already, the laughter that had once dominated this space was gone, replaced by something far more powerful: uncertainty. Because the name carried weight. Bruce Lee, a legend, someone everyone recognized as unparalleled. And the realization that this man had trained him, even partly, even for a moment, shattered every assumption in the room. They had mocked an old man. They had assumed weakness. They had assumed nothing would happen. But now they realized they had been wrong. So very wrong. The old man took a slow breath. And in that pause, in that quiet, the room felt it, the calm before the storm. A storm not of anger, not of loudness, but of unmatched skill, hidden for decades, waiting for the perfect moment. And the perfect moment was now. They had no idea what was coming next. They had no clue how completely their world was about to shift. All they knew was that this old man was Bruce Lee's teacher. And that revelation alone was enough to change everything. The room was completely silent now. Not the polite kind of silence, but the heavy kind, the kind that presses down on your chest, making every breath feel slower, heavier, more deliberate. Nobody dared to speak. Nobody dared to move. Even the smallest gesture felt dangerous, as if it might break the fragile equilibrium that had suddenly taken over the space. The old man's eyes moved slowly, deliberately, scanning the room. Not angrily, not defensively, but carefully. Every glance measured, every flicker of attention purposeful. He noticed the subtle shifts in their body language, the way the strongest, loudest men unconsciously leaned back, the way nervous hands hovered over pockets, the way eyes darted quickly to one another for reassurance. Something was happening, something intangible, something that could not be explained with words. And it was terrifying. The tension wasn't coming from the threat of violence. It wasn't coming from a shout, a kick, a punch. It was coming from awareness, from presence, from understanding that this man had lived decades in the kind of discipline and training they couldn't even imagine. It was the kind of power that doesn't scream, the kind that whispers, the kind that forces respect before it even acts. The laughter, the mockery, the casual arrogance, all of it had vanished, now replaced by uncertainty, confusion, subtle fear. A young man, the one who had been the loudest earlier, shifted nervously. He tried to make a joke, to break the tension. "So, you really trained Bruce Lee?" he stammered. The old man didn't answer. He didn't need to. His calm, controlled breathing, his steady posture, the quiet weight in his eyes, it said more than words ever could. The young man's smile faltered. He looked at the others. He realized they were all thinking the same thing. This wasn't a man to be underestimated. Not now. Not ever. Every muscle in the old man's body seemed to hum with awareness. Not aggression. Not anger. Awareness. Focus. Decades of training and experience condensed into a calm, measured presence. The room seemed to shrink. The walls closer. The air heavier. Every heartbeat louder. Every breath more conscious. They were trapped in the tension he created, not by violence, but by sheer skill, mastery, and the aura of someone who had been underestimated for a lifetime. And then small movements began to matter. A shift of a foot, a glance, a subtle lean forward. Every action now seemed charged, deliberate, meaningful. They wanted to leave, but they couldn't. It was as if invisible threads held them in place, drawn in by curiosity, by awe, by the undeniable presence of a man whose life had been about shaping legends. This was the calm before the storm, but it wasn't a storm of fists or fury. It was a storm of respect, a storm of understanding, a storm that would teach them a lesson they didn't even know they needed. One by one, their minds raced. How could they have been so wrong? How could they have thought this man was weak? How could they have ignored the decades of experience, the wisdom, the skill, the training that had once shaped Bruce Lee himself? And then came the realization that none of them could deny. The storm was not coming from anger. It was coming from excellence, from mastery, from a lifetime of preparation. They felt it in the air, in their bones, in the way the old man moved without moving. They felt it in the quiet authority that demanded respect. They felt it in the weight of history that rested on his shoulders. It was terrifying, not because it was violent, but because it was inevitable. Inevitable that they would understand. Inevitable that they would respect. Inevitable that they would recognize the truth. And in that tense silence, before anything happened, before any demonstration of skill, they already knew something they could not ignore. This was not a man to be underestimated. This was a teacher, a master, a legend hiding in plain sight. And the moment they realized it, the room was no longer theirs. It belonged, in that instant, to the calm, quiet, and unshakable force of decades of skill and mastery. The storm hadn't even started yet, but everyone could feel it, and no one would ever forget it. The silence in the room was almost unbearable now. Not the silence of calm, not the silence of peace, but the silence of tension that makes your skin crawl, your heart race, your mind scream at every second. They had realized it. They had finally realized they had been wrong. All the assumptions, all the mockery, all the casual arrogance shattered in an instant. And yet, they still didn't fully understand. This was not just an old man, not just a teacher, not just a master. This was a man whose life had been defined by patience, discipline, and excellence. A man whose skills had been honed to perfection over decades. A man who had once trained Bruce Lee. The weight of that fact alone was enough to command respect, to demand attention, to silence the loudest voices in the room. But the old man didn't gloat. He didn't threaten. He didn't show off. He simply stood there, calm, steady, aware. And in that calm, something extraordinary happened. The room seemed to shrink. Every movement felt heavier. Every sound sharper. Every breath more conscious. They realized that this man didn't need to prove himself. They realized that all the power, all the skill, all the knowledge he possessed was invisible until it needed to be seen. And now it was being seen. The youngest one, the loudest one, tried to laugh nervously. "So, what are you going to do, old man?" he asked, his voice trembling. The old man didn't answer. He didn't need to. The answer was written in his posture, in his eyes, in the aura he carried. It was a quiet, undeniable force that spoke louder than any words ever could. It said, "I'm not what you think I am, and everything you believe about strength is about to change." And in that moment, their minds raced. They thought of all the times they had underestimated others, all the times they had mocked someone they thought was weak, all the times they had assumed control without understanding the unseen. And now they understood. Not fully, not yet, but enough to know that this was not a situation they could escape easily. Because this man, this teacher, this legend hiding in plain sight, carried a history that could not be ignored. The air felt thick. The room seemed smaller. Every heartbeat louder than the last. Every second stretching longer, heavier, more terrifying in a way they couldn't name. And then the old man took a single step forward. Not fast, not sudden, not aggressive, but deliberate, intentional, precise. A movement so small, so simple, it shifted everything. The tension in the room was unbearable. They didn't know what would happen next. They couldn't predict it. And that uncertainty was far more frightening than any attack could be. Because sometimes, the most powerful moments aren't about fists. They're about presence. They're about skill hidden for decades. They're about the quiet, unshakable mastery that forces respect without a single word. And this was one of those moments. The old man didn't strike. He didn't shout. He didn't demonstrate. But the room changed. The energy shifted. The arrogance dissolved. And in that shift, one undeniable truth became clear. They had mocked the wrong man. They had underestimated the wrong man. They had no idea who they were standing in front of. And the moment they realized it, it was too late to go back. The storm hadn't started yet. The history hadn't fully revealed itself. But the first ripple had already hit, and nothing would ever be the same. Because the most powerful people in the world are not the loudest, not the youngest, not the ones who brag. They're the ones you laugh at first, and the ones you underestimate will change everything.